I read an article the other day that said, according to numerous studies, alcohol abuse is the number one substance abuse for those retired. We're going to talk about that on today's Hot Topic, as well as answer your listener questions on today's episode of The Retirement Answer Man Show. I'm your host, Roger Whitney. This is the show dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement, but rock retirement. I like that music. Now, I'm not making light of this idea of substance abuse in retirement. It's just cool music. It makes me think of, well, someone that's drunk. So we're going to talk a little bit about why is it that alcohol abuse is number one for retired people in terms of substance abuse, and how that happens. There's about 6 or 7 reasons I saw in this article. And also we're going to talk about how that might impact you a little bit financially, just in your decision making. But we can't do any of that until we have that all important disclaimer. Real simple. Don't take advice from me unless you are a client. Don't take advice from anyone that doesn't have enough information to understand what's going on in your life. That's really common sense. So think of this as helpful hints in education. Before you make a decision, talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor, and definitely not your bartender. So I came across this article in nextavenue.org, and I'll put a link to it in the 6 Shot Saturday, talking about substance abuse, specifically alcohol abuse, with older adults, meaning those over age 55. About 3 million Americans over age 55 suffer from alcohol abuse. And by some estimates, that figure is going to continue to grow up to about 6 million in 2020. Now, this is an issue as we get older. And I'm not going to get too deep into this because I'm not a counselor and I'm definitely not an expert in the subject, although I've had families and clients that have seen the impact of this, so I get it from that perspective. But according to the article, increased alcohol consumption in retirement can really be impacted by 6 factors. Number 1 is your reason for retiring. Was it voluntary or was it involuntary and forced due to health issues? Involuntary retirement is much more likely related to increased drinking. And I think it was a week or two ago that we talked about half of people end up retiring before they planned because either a health issue or it's forced upon them by an employment. So if it's a voluntary retirement, the likelihood, or statistically anyway, it's not as likely as if it's forced upon you and you're thrust into this chaos of trying to figure it all out. And that makes total sense, right? Number 2 is your social network. And this makes total sense, right? You're going to be like the 5 or 10 people that you surround yourself with most. And if you surround yourself with people that regularly drink alcohol, you're more likely to do the same, which increases the likelihood of abusing it, right? That's true for anything. It could be eating or anything else. I had a client, this is a long time ago, and when they retired, they moved to a gated community with a golf course because they were big golfers. And everybody had a golf cart, so they all drove around on golf carts in the neighborhood, golfing and other things. But what they found was the social network within that neighborhood, most people were their age, early retirement, and they were very social and sort of partying all the time. And after a year and a half or so, they're like, man, we got to get out of this neighborhood. Not that we don't love these people, but this culture of driving around on the golf carts, going to Sally's house and then Bob's house, there was a party almost every day. They knew that they had to extract themselves from that social network because although they enjoyed alcohol, they didn't want to abuse it, and they saw where this was heading. So your social network is one big factor that could impact it. Another one is, number 3, according to the article, is what work was like before you retired. According to the article, leaving stressful work environment might result in less alcohol consumption in retirement, while quitting work that you found rewarding and that you loved made you more apt to turn to alcohol after that source of happiness and fulfillment vanished. I thought that was interesting. So if you're leaving a stressful job, you're less likely, according to the data, to be susceptible to it. But if you leave something that you truly love anyway, and then you don't replace that with something healthy, well, you might replace it with something unhealthy. Number 4 on the list was your age in retirement. According to studies, alcohol abuse is much more severe if you retire relatively young, like in your 40s or early 50s. Conversely, according to the article, those that continue to work despite being eligible to retire are a lot less likely. Number 5 on the list was your financial stress. And stress in general, and this makes sense because depression and anxiety, I've read many articles that say that the susceptibility to that increases in retirement. And I've talked about this in various ways, that it's a much bigger transition than a lot of us realize. And if you're more susceptible to feeling lonely or depressed, alcohol is, at least initially, a comfort drug that you can turn to. And number 6 on their list is your marriage. According to a book called A Couple's Guide to a Happy Marriage, roughly 2/3 of retirees experienced increased marital conflicts and lower satisfaction within the first 2 years of retirement. And it makes sense given the monumental change that happens when someone retires. So let's take a husband and wife. Let's assume they both work and they retire at the same time. They may have been very happy as a couple having these outside releases for social network and purpose and everything else. And, they likely didn't spend the majority of their day together or their week together in that function. And then they suddenly find themselves with each other 100% of the time and basically being thrown into an environment where the rules have changed and trying to figure out how do you act together and how do you maintain your sense of self and deal with someone you love, but all day long. And that can be true whether one spouse is working and the other isn't or not. It's a big area of change. And that's one reason why I talk about building a vision together that you're working towards rather than just simply letting it, bam, hit you, because you're going to find yourself in conflict. And all of a sudden, if I had to live with one person that I only really saw 4 hours a day, 24 hours a day, there's going to be some conflict, right? As you figure it out together. And that can be done in a healthy way or in an unhealthy way. So in general, I think alcohol is like anything, you can't abuse it. And you got to be aware of the ideas or the symptoms that, hey, this is not healthy. I may not be, quote unquote, abusing it, but I may be headed that direction, sort of like that couple I talked about. Now, there's a separate article that I was really going to talk about, but it led me to this article I just talked about. And this is one in CNBC that said almost half of Americans shop online while drunk. And here's how much it's costing them. And according to their survey, gin drinkers spend on average $80 more if they're shopping online intoxicated. They actually broke it down by, I don't know how scientific this study was. Rum drinkers spend about $53 more, down to whiskey drinkers are the lowest at $39 more than a sober shopper online. It makes sense, right? Inhibitions come down and you go online. And this segues into, just think of shopping online as general. If we think of what the objective of all retailers are, and online has put this into hyperdrive, is to decrease the friction of any purchase decision. So the more that the decrease in friction or disruption to your life is in order to buy something, the quicker transactions are going to happen and the more often transactions are going to happen. I mean, think of Amazon one click. I mean, you can literally be having a business meeting and spend as much money as you want by just clicking the mouse once if you're on Amazon browsing around. And you get that rush, that consumer rush of getting the package at your door the next day or 2 days later. I see that a lot, and that's totally unrelated to alcohol. It's just simply, this is another thing, like any drug, it's just a different fix that I see happen with retirees is they don't know what to do with their time, so they browse. Even if it's just fixing up the house, it all pushes you to buy more. Wow, you put alcohol in the mix, you just keep spending even more money. I thought these were two interesting, insightful articles that we probably need to be aware of if we want to rock retirement. Now let's go talk to Nicole. Well, welcome to the Practical Planning segment. We're going to dive into listener questions. Hello, Nicole.
Hello, Roger.
Now, I understand today is a very exciting day for you and many mothers this season. And what day is that?
Well, my older son goes back to school today. He's going to be a first grader.
How is
And
that?
I'm a lot more excited this year. Last year with kindergarten, the nerves were pretty high for me.
Yeah, and you're wound pretty tight when it comes to stuff like that, so I understand that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, no, I got to be careful here because I am working diligently not to tease you and be nice to you.
You have a lot of work to do.
With that, let's get to some questions. What do we got on deck today?
Well, you will be very happy to know our first question is an audio question from Dylan.
Nice. All right.
Hi, Roger. This is Dylan from the Chicago area. Really enjoy your podcast and have enjoyed, as of late, the series on Social Security. However, my question relates to mortgages and real estate. My wife and I currently own our home outright. We're looking to potentially sell this home in the spring and want to buy the new home in cash. So we have cash saved, and we would use the proceeds from the sale of the old home. I don't want to get into a situation where we're waiting for the sale of the old home and the proceeds, because again, we need to team that up with the cash we've saved to purchase the new home. What is the best way to navigate if that situation arises? Is it to get a bridge loan or a home equity line of credit or a home equity loan? Your feedback on this would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, Roger.
Well, first off, congratulations on having a paid-for house. That is a pretty... Think about the money that it takes to do that. And my guess is that you probably are a good saver in addition to doing that. So bravo for you. My wife and I have bought 4 homes. I think it's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 homes. We're in our 4th home in our marriage. And we've always had to struggle with the same thing. How do you make that transition? And I think you're going down the right path, Dylan. You can do a line of credit on your current home, and how much is going to be dependent on the state, because different states have rules about that. You can do a bridge loan if you have a good relationship with a bank. I think you can explore that. Another option would be, if your family has the spirit for this, is you can work on selling your home, move everything into pods or have it held with movers and go rent or live with relatives for the period in between. Some people can do that a little easier than most. Some of that's going to have to do with on your spirit, but I think those are going to be the options that you have. I've never done a bridge loan. I've never had a client that has done a bridge loan. Usually what they're doing is they manage the timing of the purchase and the sale, and they either rent for a small period of time or they move in with family to handle the in-between. Now, depending on where you're at, the more blunt way to do it would be to just simply finance the new house, assuming you have the income to qualify for the payments, and then pay it off right away when you sell your current home. Now, the risk with that are going to be what? You're going to have the payments that you got to make sure that you hit. You're going to have the extra cost on doing a traditional mortgage, but sometimes that stuff can be negotiated depending on whether you're buying a new house or an older house, but that would be a more blunt way to do it. But I think you're going down the right path. My suggestion would be is to go talk to either a broker that finances or that works with lots of different lenders, or go talk to a local credit union and walk through what the cost is for each one of those options. But it sounds like you're going down the right path.
Our next question is really more of a statement, I guess. It's clarifying something from the Social Security podcast. Sherry wrote in, I think you mentioned that only earned, not investment income, is used to determine how much of your Social Security is taxable. Maybe I misunderstood what was stated or the context of when, but for federal taxes, it is based on your adjusted gross income plus non-taxable interest and half of your Social Security benefit. The IRS has a form that can be used to do this calculation.
Thanks, Sherry. You're exactly right. And I haven't reviewed the tapes on what I said. But I love the clarification because that is exactly right. And this is one thing I love, Nicole, about the show is we have some really smart people that listen to the show. And it's,
we do.
We really do. Some of the questions I get are paragraphs of pretty detailed stuff. I love it's
you
like
watch your P's and Q's.
and my B's. It's like crowdsourcing answers because we have a lot of people that have so many different experiences. So thanks for clarifying that, Sherry. I can't remember exactly how I worded that. Hopefully I did it correctly, but that is a good clarification.
Our next question is from Denise, who wrote in that she is planning on working for at least 2 more years and wants to know, how do you turn your 401k and IRA into an income stream? Make your own paycheck?
Well, the really simple answer is, well, if you need $5,000 a month, you just start taking $5,000 a month out of your IRA or your 401k. The problem is we don't know how long that's going to last. And even if you're retiring in 2 years, you probably have a good 20 to 30 years that you're going to need this money and you don't want to run out. So the idea of creating an income stream is traditionally how we think about it. Because we think of whether it was our parents or our grandparents, we buy things that are throwing off income and then we try to just spend the income so we still have the money that we have. Like clipping coupons. That's usually how we think about getting income from a portfolio. And that's a dangerous way for baby boomers, for most baby boomers. And the reason it's a dangerous way of thinking about it is, one, you're going to go try to source things that are going to generate enough income to get you the income that you think you need, which can lead you to things that may throw off a lot of yield, but have their own risks associated with them. Think of junk bonds or high yield bonds, or master limited partnerships that throw off lots of income, or closed-end bond funds that throw off a lot of income, but you don't realize they're leveraged inside the portfolio in order to generate that income. So I'd be really careful, Denise, in thinking of it in those terms. We've talked about the bucket approach. We have a webinar that, yes, I know, Nicole, she's looking at me. She's giving me the eye. Yes, we're going to redo that, but I think it's still very valid, and that's how we do it. Is you can create this payroll account to throw off income. But when you're thinking about investing, the core investments need to be not about income generation solely, but about total return, because that's going to do a couple things. One is you definitely want to have income being thrown off more than what you might invest if you're Nicole's age. You have a birthday coming up, by the way. I know because you put like 20 reminders on my calendar. But you also want to have things that are throwing more income. And then that way, this will do a couple things. One is it will help in the income generation, but it will also help you potentially grow your assets and be a really important hedge against inflation, because you're looking at probably 20, 30 years in retirement. So it can't just be about clipping income. So I would think of it a little bit differently. Maybe go check out the bucket approach. And then ultimately, you want to have a more holistic roadmap, so you know whatever you're going to start put into those buckets is not going to handicap you 20, 30 years down the road.
Our next question is, how's it going on being nicer to me?
Was that not nicer to you? You have a birthday coming up. That's exciting.
Next question is from David.
You have a birthday coming up. What do you mean?
I do have a birthday coming up, but you don't have any reminders on your calendar.
And a work anniversary.
That's also true.
Yes. Does that mean I have to give you a raise?
Do you remember the last time you gave me a raise?
It was out of the blue. I do. It was earlier this year, and I
think I'm good.
I didn't even tell you. I just did it. That's the best way to do things, is surprise.
Okay. All right. Are we ready to do David's question? Are you still recording?
I am still recording.
No.
We're keeping that in there. All right, let's go. David
writes in, Roger, can you explain the pros and or cons of giving to a church, charity, or educational institution through a gift annuity? What is the tax benefit, and how is the income you receive from it treated tax-wise?
A charitable gift annuity. Wait, let me get my geek hat on, Nicole. Okay, hold on. How do I look? Good?
Yes,
right.
Very geeky.
Okay, what is a charitable gift annuity? A charitable gift annuity is a contractual deal you do with a charity where you give them assets, and in return, they guarantee to pay you a specified amount in an annuity form. So I give you $1 million in assets, and you're going to pay me X amount for the rest of my life. And then whatever remains goes to the charity. Make sense?
Okay.
And then, so what determines the amount that you get as an annuity payment? Well, that's going to depend on your age and the amount of the gift. And there are tables that will show you this. You can Google it. There are tables that will say, well, if you're 65 years old, it's going to be about a 5.7% rate. The older you are, obviously, the higher the rate will be. So in terms of tax, how is this income to you taxed? Well, it's going to be like any annuity in that it's going to be a mix of you're getting a tax-free portion, which is basically a return of some of your principal, and then you're going to be taxed on a separate amount, which is basically what the interest is or what you're earning on that particular gift. So what ends up happening is they go to an actuarial table. And this is exciting, Nicole. We go to an actuarial table. She's shaking her head. Yeah. Okay, stop yawning. And then they look at it. So if you live beyond your life expectancy according to the table, what ends up happening is the whole thing becomes taxable as far as the income that's coming in. So why would you do this? Well, one reason that we see people do these types of things is usually because they have some highly appreciated asset that they're trying to unlock. And rather than sell it and realize the taxes, they work with the charitable organization to donate the asset and get the income, and it allows them from a tax efficiency way. Pros and cons, this is going to be much more of a legacy type of planning issue, meaning that you have enough wealth that you are going to be giving a decent amount to charity anyway. And so this is less about, hey, this is a cool way to generate income during my retirement, and it's going to be more about, hey, I have the wherewithal and the desire to give to a particular charity or charities, and this is a elegant way to do it that can benefit both parties. So I'm by no means an expert in these, but that's the basics of how these work, and I think there's some pros and cons to them, but you definitely want to have this legacy mindset and enough money outside of what you're thinking of doing to do one of these. Oh, one last thing as far as a benefit. So when you make this contribution, you get an immediate deduction, which is basically the net present value of the actual gift backing out the payments that are going to you. So you're going to get an immediate deduction for a portion of what the gift is. You're going to get your income, and at the end, the charity is going to get whatever is remaining. And they get the use of all the assets, right? Because they're just on the hook for paying you the premiums, but you get that tax deduction up front. And that's another reason why someone might do that. And that's going to be a little bit more of a complicated situation where there's some advanced planning going on. It's not a bad option to look at, but I'll tell you, as far as the tools in the toolbox, you rarely see these things except for, very high net worth individuals.
All right. Our next question is from Robert, who has a question about bonds. He says, I thought when equities in the market went south, bonds would always go in the opposite direction, but it doesn't look to me like that's what's happening. Looks to me when markets are up, bonds are also up, and vice versa. Any explanation?
I know, it's like the Twilight Zone, right? So the fact that bonds and stocks don't move in tandem is a statistical observation over very long periods of time. And like average annual returns, you never get really close to what the average is. It's always different on the short to the medium term. So when we're talking about this relationship with any asset class bonds to another asset class stocks, we're really talking about a concept called correlation. Right? That's one of the three foundations of asset allocation, is what is the relationship in how something acts from one to the other. We're keeping that geek hat on, I guess. So when you're looking at correlation, you can have anywhere from positive one correlation, meaning that things move exactly together in lockstep, sort of like soldiers marching, or you can have negative one correlation, which are like Nicole's children walking in the mall. They're just going all different directions. Usually one's going one direction, the other's going the other direction.
Nobody goes to malls anymore, Roger.
I'm so old. So, she's standing there at the park and one kid's going one direction and the other kid's going the exact opposite direction. So that would be negative one correlation. You're right. I don't go to malls either, but that was just the visual I had in my head. I think you're going to be a mall walker when you're older. I see you as a mall walker.
I would be very surprised if malls are still around, but sure, why not?
Yeah. So normally you're never going to have a perfect correlation of +1 or a perfectly negative correlation of -1. It's always somewhere in between. And that's over long periods of time. So if you look at bonds to stocks, they're not negatively correlated. They're actually positively correlated to neutral, which would be 0, where it's just random. Okay, if that's not complicated enough, this is interesting, is that correlations, and this is a problem with asset allocation on the short term, because asset allocation, the idea of mixing these assets is that they're not correlated together. That's a big part of it. But in the short to near term, correlation can be very fluid. So if we think of '08, that '08 market event, there were things that were, not very correlated together. But when there's times of major stress, everything correlated to one. That was a very black and white period of time where asset classes that normally didn't move together, they all moved together at the same direction, or they moved the exact opposite direction. So in '08 event, when markets are really under stress, you had that happen with corporate bonds, high yield bonds, all sorts of asset classes became almost perfectly correlated with stocks, meaning that they went down. And literally the only asset that didn't, and I'm being dramatic here, there may have been others, were treasury bonds, because there was this huge flight to safety. So this idea of correlation over shorter periods of times is a little bit more nuanced than basic asset allocation. As an example, if we look at the correlation between bonds and stocks, say yearly correlations, since 1927, it's been as almost perfectly negative correlation back in the '08 area, and as high as about 0.9, meaning almost perfectly correlated back in like 93, 94 timeframe. Correlations change. And that's part of why, like when we invest with clients, Nicole, we used a fixed allocation that is based off of asset allocation, but we also have a flexible portion that takes into account that, hey, asset allocation works in the really, really, really long term, but because we're dealing with mainly people, baby boomers that are closer or in retirement, we need to pay attention to, because the seasons can be really, really different than what these long-term averages can show you. With me so far, Nicole? Wake up. You with me?
I'm with you. I'm still here.
All right. We're almost done with this. Now, what's going on right now? Well, we are in a period of change, right? A pretty big period of change, because we had this massive QE, quantitative easing, that happened after '08. Tons of quantitative easing, which is money being thrown into the markets. Interest rates have been near zero for almost a decade. And we're starting to see slowly the normalization of interest rates. And so when you have periods of change like this, assets can act a little wonky. We're raising interest rates because the economy is good. They're trying to get back to normal interest rates. They're trying to ease down the quantitative easing or the money printing. Well, everybody's trying to figure out, well, what the heck does that mean for everything? Because if you have slowly rising interest rates, which is better than quickly rising, well, now the old bonds aren't as valuable as newer bonds, because the newer bonds are being issued with higher interest rates. The cost of capital to borrow money goes up as interest rates go up. Well, if it costs more to borrow money, what could that do to house prices? Right? It probably could be a dampener on house prices. What could it do to corporates financing growth? Well, it could cost them more money, which is going to hurt their cash flow, which could hurt their profits. What does it do to the valuation of all things, stocks, real estate, and everything else? Because now someone that has money, they're saying, wow, it used to be I had to go into these riskier assets because I'm going to get zero in safe money or a money market. Well, now you can get closer to 2% in a money market. That's a little bit more viable opportunity than taking risk with money. So we're in this period of change, Robert, and everybody's trying to navigate this at the same time. So you're going to have periods of time when these things move in wonky ways and may become more correlated, because we're all just trying to work out what this new environment's going to look like. Traditionally, what's the role of bonds? The role of bonds in a portfolio are to throw off income. So it's actually rising interest rates will slowly help us there. Well, the other role of bonds is traditionally, we had correlation as one of those benchmarks in asset allocation. Another one of those benchmarks or pillars is standard deviation, which is basically measuring the volatility. How volatile is an asset class, meaning how much it can go up and down in a period of time. And bonds, historically and seasonally, are a lot less volatile than stocks. So that's a role that they play in a portfolio. And then lastly, a well-constructed bond portfolio is a good life vest during times of real stress in the markets, because that's generally where people are going to run when they're scared. So they still have a role, but yeah, Robert, I get it. It can totally be wonky on the short, medium term. And that's one reason why, we've talked about how you allocate in your bond portfolio is more problematic than it is typically. And one reason why we like high yielding money markets and insured cash accounts as an alternative, because it doesn't have that price risk as bonds do right now because of this period of change. Oh, you really are going to yawn right now, Nicole.
That was a really long answer.
Well, it's a deep question.
It was.
Right? Sometimes you got to go, it's not just a simple answer. So hopefully that gave you some perspective, Robert. Can I put this geek hat away? I'm a little tired. Can we go get happy?
I think we should.
Let's go get happy. Hey, welcome to the Happy Lab, where we noodle on how to live a happier life. And one way to live a happier life is, and I've found this in many relationships, treat people how you want to be treated.
Oh.
Right? Because usually you're waiting for the other person to put out the olive branch, to be more helpful, to be sweeter, whatever it is, and you can't wait for them. It's always best to be the one treating someone how you want to be treated. Wouldn't you agree, Nicole?
So what I'm hearing is that you would like to be teased a lot more jokes made at your expense, maybe.
You tease me all the time. I've heard 4 or 5 references of my age literally in the last hour. So, yeah.
Really? Okay,
yeah.
We'll have to ask the listeners if they heard that too.
Well, some of it was off air, but it is a valid concept. Wouldn't you agree?
It is a valid concept.
Yeah.
I do agree.
So if you want to be happier,
how you want to be treated.
Exactly. So let's go do that.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off. I love that music. My wife was listening to it the other day and she liked it. I like the Smart Sprint music. And this is the segment where we take a little baby step to set a goal for the next 7 days to create a great life in rock retirement. I'm going to disclose what my sprint has been for August. And that is, it's related to our hot topic, which is I am not drinking alcohol for the entire month of August. Now, no, I'm not abusing it. I don't have a problem. But I did notice, it's been the summer season. I've been traveling a lot. You have a glass of wine. I'm like, wow, that's fairly consistent, not to excess. But it's usually a good idea to just make sure you have control of things so they don't get out of control, right? And that could be drinking. It could be shopping. It could be teasing. It could be lots of different things. So in the next 7 days, I want you to noodle on what is one thing that you can do to practice some self-help and self-control so you are in control of all areas of your life. How's that sound, Nicole? What are you going to choose?
You put me on the spot. I don't know what I would choose. Remember, I'm in everybody's starting school season. So.
Yeah, I'll give you a pass today.
Yeah.
All right. So, Nicole.
Roger.
So we're still working on Project X. We haven't named it, but it's the super secret project that we've been asked for a long time on building an educational coaching club, for lack of a better word. And we want to do it because we've been asked to do it, but we don't want to do it if you really don't want it. So last week we sent a survey in 6-Shot Saturday asking for your feedback. We're going to put that link in there again. We're really excited about this because I think this is going to be a lot of fun and very helpful, but I want your feedback. So if you're signed up for 6-Shot Saturday, please fill out a super quick survey so you can help us help you. All right, Nicole, get your kids off to school.
Did you just call me kid?
You are a kid. And everyone else, I hope you have a wonderful day.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.